Are we recording, James? Oh, okay. I just want. This is good stuff.
I mean, I can do it all again, I guess. But
well, it's
take
better
two.
when it's fresh. You know?
Yeah, it is. So, Darius, thanks for coming on Impossible Way of Life.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
is that the
where are
correct
you
way
right
to
now?
pronounce your first name, Darius?
There's no official pronunciation.
Oh,
How do you pronounce it?
Darius works. My mother says Darius.
Nice.
Right.
Mean kids on the playground say Darius or Milky
Yeah.
Butt.
Yeah.
We had a friend who was the drummer for the Posies. Yeah, I don't know if you remember them. Who is Darius?
Yes.
Who lived in
I get that a
Vancouver.
lot.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, you can't really do that with my name. It's just James. So, I mean, you can't
I
really
call you
mispronounce
Jim
it.
sometimes.
Jimmy's cool. I mean, there's a few, it's like 2 or 3 people who call me Jim, but there are people who, they do it in a almost like paternalistic way, and I let them because maybe I want him to be my daddy or something. I don't know, but it's normally it's just James. Anyway, that's not that important. So we're joined here by Darius Van Arman, independent label founder, Jaguar. I thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
And yeah, I just wanted to start. I don't normally start kind of like coming off the gates this hard, but I read yesterday your Stereo Gum op-ed from last November that's entitled "The Struggle for Independence in the Modern Age: Our Fight Against Market Concentration and for Art, Culture and Access." I actually urge anyone listening to read it because it's a really good piece. This is a podcast ostensibly about like classic rock and indie music, and you know, it's lighthearted and jovial most of the time, but like this is something that we've sort of touched on. It's like a sort of the changing role in independent curation, labels, the industry in general, but also like the people making the music. And you kind of really, I think, exemplify the whole thing in this that we kind of touch on and try and understand as a podcast and as musicians, because that's our jobs. Like, what do you think the role is of like an independent record label today compared to when you started it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, maybe I'll start answering that question by going backwards.
Sure.
Yeah, so when I first released a record, I think at the time I wasn't even really sure I wanted to be a business, but there was a local artist who was a friend of mine, and he had a band, and he was looking for a label, and I got some windfall money, and I was like, okay, I can maybe try this. And I think back then it was simpler. This is pre-digital music, it was really only one format. I mean, there were cassettes too, but really the only thing in the mid '90s that was working or commercially viable was the compact disc. And all I imagined the label's role was to help fund the making of the CD, help get it in the stores, maybe help a little bit with recording money, if that, with the artist. And that was helpful to this artist. There's a band called The Curious Digit, and they had not really released any music before. Fast forward to now, Secretly Group, the companies I'm a part of, that includes the label I founded, Jaguar. We do a lot more. We have more people on our team, many more people. We engage in marketing. We have different teams for both digital and physical distribution, and we have licensing experts. And yes, for sure, we like help pay for recordings to happen and help cover the cost of marketing ideas. And I think the idea is that the modern label is, by providing its access to distribution, its experts that are on staff, financing, great creative marketing ideas is making a difference for the artist. That means that the artist is going to have more impact culturally, maybe have a greater chance of sustaining a living than if they were doing it by themselves.
Yeah.
I say all this, but I also want to sort of recognize, like, it's a really hard time for labels to make that argument.
Right.
They're artists that self-release and achieve everything they want to achieve. And I think it's a fair question for some artists, like, would a label, add value?
Sure.
So it depends maybe more nowadays, you might say, on perhaps like where the band is at or something like that, or the artist, because back in the day, even if you were just starting out, obviously a label was going to make the difference for you, but maybe now there's more of a scale in terms of, like, would you say you'd be able to do more for an artist once they're a little bit more established than if they're just starting out and have no success, no fans, anything?
I think for sure Secretly Group can do a little bit more with an artist that's established.
Yeah.
A bit. But I do miss that era of, like, working with artists at the very
sculpting something, creating the image and the brand. Yeah.
I mean,
or being part of something from the beginning, and then holding on and enjoying that ride.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, for sure.
Did you see like you were talking about what your early sort of foundational understanding of what a record label was? Like, did you see it? Obviously, you saw this business side of it that you're talking about, but did you see yourself kind of more philosophically as like a curator, a kind of patron of these bands, and even just like more simply like A&R?
Yes,
like
for sure. I mean, well, anyone who starts a label in their bedroom or by themselves, at least back then, I don't think had any sort of illusion that this was going to be a something that helped pay the rent. It was really sort of a reflection of things that moved you artistically, the music that you felt like was needed a champion, and you kind of attached your ego to a subset of artists, maybe locally, or artists that were in the same scene or had the same sort of genre. So yeah. For sure, there's a curatorial spirit from the beginning.
I love your story about the band Drunk that you talk about in this op-ed, and how you the counterpoint you have of that's the first time you made any money, and I think it's about $350 from a UK label distributor who wanted to distribute this CD that you'd made, and the fact that now on Spotify they've just been demonetized for having not enough streams to even give you $100. I think it's kind of an interesting.
Is that a thing?
Counterpoint.
Spotify can demonetize.
You got to read Darius's op-ed because it. No, I don't mean it like that. I read it. I stumbled across it, and it's fascinating because there's a lot in it that.
That's crazy. I didn't know they could do that.
They can, and it's complicated. Like back 30 years ago, we were in a sales economy in the music industry. We were selling CDs. And then we sold downloads as, Napster was coming online, and people were sharing music for free. And the music industry got hit hard by peer-to-peer file sharing. And streaming emerged. And streaming saved the day, but it also created new problems.
Sure.
And I think one of the things that, was exciting about streaming was like, man, any bands, any label, regardless of the size, could get their music anywhere in the world and have a chance at success. The lottery tickets were available to everyone. But it also contributed to there being so much content, so much competition, such a glut of music. It became harder for consumers to sort of separate the signal from the noise quality-wise. And so now there's a different kind of softer, stochastic gatekeeper, which is
perhaps an algorithm, really.
Yes, an algorithm.
Yeah.
So the demonetization, Johnny, just to talk to you about that real quick.
Yeah.
Spotify wanted, and other digital services wanted to sort of like um, create some friction for these like do-it-yourself distributors who are just putting up anything anyone wanted to put up on Spotify,
I see.
and so I think in part because the major labels were complaining that their revenues are being diluted because
By
of all
white
this
noise
glut.
or something.
Yeah.
Ostensibly, that was
So
the idea, I guess.
yeah, and so I think if something didn't stream up to a certain threshold, it wouldn't get any monetization at all. And that was the idea.
How do you feel ethically about streaming? Like as somebody who, like you say, was in a the way we romanticize a label in the '90s was that way, and now just so many artists view it as this evil empire that's not paying them, and do you think of it as that, or do you think of it as just a necessary evil that you can work with and make it happen for people still?
Yeah, I have complex thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I I think it's changed the relationship between fans and artists. Um, and it's created new winners and losers because of that. There are some artists who do better in the streaming economy than before,
Sure.
and vice versa. So I don't want to just out of hand say streaming is evil, but it seems to have commodified music to an extent.
Yeah.
And it's reduced sort of the special connection fans felt, when they bought a record or an album. The economics are much tougher for small and medium sized artists. And so I think that the thing that we didn't contemplate was that streaming would start over time focusing more on catalog and music from the past than new music and new voices and new artists. And being a business that's invested in investing in new works and helping build the careers of new artists, I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I will say at the same time, like, what was the industry going to do when people were sharing things for free on peer-to-peer?
I think that speaking about that experience for independent musicians or musicians in general, it's probably been the same, I assume, for independent labels, as well as like media consolidation affecting, the likes of, independent journalism or something like Melody Maker or Enemy and Pitchfork. These things are just sort of like, they're shells of what they were. So I guess it's worth remembering, like you say, that these streaming services, they're in the business of subscriber retention. They're not in the business of spreading culture. It's like in where we live, when a real estate company offers up like a little piece of, some kind of room for a little bit that they're, to an artist, and sort of suggests that they're in any way actually interested in the work that independent artists are doing. I guess it's worth remembering that they're just businesses after all, and their bottom line is how many people stay subscribed, which presumably means that they're going to favor less daring music.
And they know, and they have data on, exactly what their listeners enjoy and what will keep them on platform. And there's a subtle incentive to not rock the boat anymore.
Can I ask you then maybe like a bit of a daring question? Like, as an independent record label owner in this atmosphere or like this that we're in, do you respond to that, or do you stick to your guns and just sign the things that, you like?
I think the smaller you are, the easier you can just stick to your guns and sign what you like. Mm-hmm. The bigger you become as a business, then you do have to keep other things in the balance. Like, how do you
stay afloat?
Stay afloat, or even if you're successful, how do you, keep human jobs going within your company? So it is a point of tension within our company, just speaking honestly.
Yeah.
There are times when we're like, oh man, we would love to put out these records, but they're just not quite at the scale yet where we can, make it work financially. And so we do sometimes gravitate to things that are streaming better. out of the gates. But I would like to think that we're still only releasing music or championing music that, or partnering with artists that we have a strong connection to.
How's rock and roll doing these days anyway?
It's coming back.
Is it? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think so.
That's awesome. That's good news. I have a question based on something James said about the consolidation of media. Sir, we're coming at you with some pretty hard-hitting stuff here, I think.
No, I love it.
Normally, we just goof around and talk about the Beatles and stuff, but...
Hey, you only get one chance.
Yeah, I know.
Arman,
no, he'll be back. I can
it.
tell already. I'm wondering about self-promotion, like how you feel about it, because like the idea that, I don't want to dox him here, but our man Max Clark of Cutworms, who is on your label, I don't think he's ever been shy about the fact that he doesn't love Instagram and going on there and having to talk about himself and promote his music with his face on there and stuff like that. And he does a good job of it, but there's a lot of people like him. I'm one of them, and I know tons of them. And just as a label, like directing artists to do that, how do you feel about that versus the old days when they didn't have to do it at all, and there'd be like a billboard on Sunset Boulevard like Bowie is coming or whatever, with like a new album, and then they could just kick back and be rock stars? How do you feel about the change in that department?
There's still some artists that do that. Max is like that, and has achieved his level of success that way. Another artist that's been very careful not to overextend himself is Justin Vernon of Bon Iver.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Right.
He I think he had overextended himself with his early records, and then I think reacted to that. And famously, the third album we released by Justin, 22 A Million, he gave strict orders to all of us that no picture or photo with his face could be used. So it can still be pulled off, but I get your point, Johnny. It's like there is such pressure to like engage like this social networking industrial complex.
I guess my question is also like, let's say you signed an artist who nobody knew who they were, and they were like right away with their first album, I don't want to be on Instagram all the time promoting myself and doing all that. I want you guys to handle it and do this creative marketing thing. Like, would a label go for that now?
If they believed enough in the artist.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you say something quite profound. I'm just going to keep paraphrasing your own words here when you say being independent means empowering yourself to think according to your own values, not mainstream values. It means being able to choose which systems you are a part of and who you are affiliated with, so that your artistic and spiritual expression can remain as uncorrelated, unique and true, and as freaky as you're inspired to be. I kind of think that that's like a very pertinent way to look at it, because you've experienced success as an independent business owner and within the music industry. So, you're probably speaking from a position of experience there when you say that.
Well, there's, it touches on something Johnny was kind of bringing up, because there's this thing you're trying to balance. You're trying to stay true to your values, and on the one hand, on the other hand, it's competitive out there, and you want to sustain what you're doing, right? So there's this tension, there's this trade-off between, staying true to yourself and maybe sort of playing the game. And I think about, take it away from music, I think about people like Bernie Sanders or AOC.
Mm-hmm.
They have spoken very loudly about monopolies like Amazon and how they're bad for us, or they've criticized Meta or Facebook, but they're on Instagram and Twitch, and I think they, and I don't fault them for it, because I think,
of course,
they're saying, hey, we need to maintain some level of power, which is connection with this, audience that can maybe help us change the world, but we can only get to them through the gatekeepers that, we're criticizing. And I feel like as a music company now, you have to be calculated and sometimes make decisions like keeping your music on Spotify, even though you do believe there are better ways to have a music industry.
Yeah.
Are there any artists on your label who have pulled their music from Spotify?
There's some that have asked or talked about it. There's some artists that we distribute that have pulled their music from Spotify.
Yeah. Interesting.
Can I ask you a kind of maybe a more optimistic question?
Yeah, I have one too. After
I just wanted to ask you, like, you know, I'm sure you have, like, if you can think of records in your, I'm sure there's several of them, records, bands you signed, music that you felt was culturally important at the time that didn't do as well as you thought it should have, like some real nearly misses and some bands that you think people should listen to that didn't listen to enough in your kind of history of owning a record label?
I will go Canadian on this answer.
Nice.
That's great. I was hoping you would.
So some bands that just are totally inspiring to me, which, you know, if I was, you know, writing the history of the world, would be much, much bigger than they are. Black Mountain,
Of course.
Pink Mountain Tops, from Vancouver.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I saw that band live, it brought such joy to me. And I also am in love with Besnard Lakes, who were from Montreal.
Yeah.
Spencer Krug, who performed as Sunset Rubdown and Moonface, but I think he's one of the sort of great lyricists ever.
I believe you had Swan Lake. You signed Swan Lake too.
Swan Lake.
You're
right, with Dan
obsessed
Behar.
with Canada, aren't you?
Yes. I used to be. I used to spend time up there.
Did you come to Vancouver a lot? Is that how that happened? With Lady Hawk, or is Lady Hawk Jaguar too?
Yep, Lady Hawk too, and then also
you came and hung out here a lot, or
a little bit back. Yeah, this is like 2000.
We were there.
6,
We
7.
were there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we were there, buddy. We were in Vancouver, and we were very much there. I remember it all very well.
Yeah, these are all our friends. James,
And,
you were in Black Mountain for a while, weren't you?
I did a couple of tours with Black Mountain when Matt left the band. Yeah, they didn't have a bass player, so I just filled in.
Oh, so which album started?
That would have been after the Saudi one and before Destroyer.
Okay.
So with kind of the OG lineup minus Matt, and then
Right.
But I was just filling in, you know, and it was really fun.
Yeah.
It was probably one of the more fun experiences I've had playing music, kind of period.
Right. Amber, Josh, Jeremy,
The squad, and it was just amazing.
Steve.
It was, Steve. I mean, they're all amazing people, but also just like, I agree with you, being like a fan of theirs and being able to just play a few shows, like being on stage. I remember a very visceral experience playing at Psychfest where I was playing and it was like, it was busy, man. It was like it was when they put it outside, you know, and there was going to be a thunderstorm and coming, and there was concern that we wouldn't be able to play, and then the storm didn't happen, or it happened right at the end of the set. And those moments are very redemptive for fledgling musicians, because I remember being on stage being like, yeah, it was worth it. Worth all these kind of bad shows I've played over the last, you know, like to just, this can nourish me for another 20 years. This is good. Yeah, it was awesome.
I remember seeing them. I mean, Vancouver was a scene back then,
was,
big
sure.
time. I worked at Zulu Records in Vancouver,
which is where I would have bought the Black. Sorry to interrupt you, because it's just exciting. When I first moved to Vancouver, I'd have gone into Zulu Records and like bought Black Mountain's record, because you might have even been the person who told me to get it.
We sold boxes of that shit.
Yeah.
And I remember going to see them, and I'll be totally honest, I was more into like, you know, old girl group records and, you know, arty things like that at that time, and the whole psych rock movement went over my head a little bit. But I went to and saw them at the Commodore. I think it was at the Commodore, I'm not sure where, and I remember just being blown away watching Josh.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't take my eyes off of Josh on the drums. I was just like mesmerized by his playing. I thought I was watching John Bonham or something.
But that first Pink Mountain Tops record too, like I remember I'd go for brunch all the time in Vancouver, and it'd always be on in this place called Slicky Jim's. I remember thinking,
always.
Who is this guy? He's got like 2 bands, you know?
Yeah,
like,
I know.
And they're both awesome.
This is good. Now we're getting into, because the reason that we wanted to have you on, and that we've been speaking with others on your label, and more to come, is because it's the 30th anniversary of the label, right?
Yes.
And so it's a celebration here, really. So it's nice to go down memory lane and talk about this stuff. It's kind of what we should be doing rather than all the streaming,
Well, people need to hear that stuff.
It's good too. I'm joking, but so what about like some highlights? What if you look back on the 30 years? What are some major highlights for you that come to mind?
Ooh, there's a lot of them.
You must have felt pretty good when you signed Bon Iver.
That actually has a Canadian connection too.
Oh, really?
Nice.
So like at the this is what, 2007, I think, 2008.
Sounds right.
Sometime like then. I think Justin had sent maybe 3 or 4 demos out, and we were one that received it. And at the time, my partner Chris Swanson, he fell in love with it, and I thought it was good. But for some reason, I had in my head that Jag should sort of stay in a more thoroughly rock direction. We were maybe folky in the past, and we were, with Black Mountain going in a more rock direction. There was another band on the label called Oneida. And,
of course.
I remember
they
that.
played in Vancouver like a couple of months ago, literally.
They put on a good show back in the day.
Seen him with Kinski a few times.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think they're on Three Gut Records, briefly.
But you had Besnard Lakes probably then as well.
Yeah. Oh no, Besnard Lakes came later.
Okay, but that's kind of in that milieu, I would say.
Yeah.
My band opened for Oneida. We definitely opened for the Cave Singers a lot.
Oh yeah,
who were a band on your label too, right?
From Seattle, which is secretly Canadian.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I mean, no, they're on Jack Jaguar. I apologize.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
It is secretly Canadian. You mean?
Yeah. But
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's like
getting back to the Canadian connection with Justin.
Yeah. So For Emma Forever Ago, I thought it was a great record, but I hadn't fallen in love with it like Chris had. But I just happened to be in Montreal. I was actually meeting up with Spencer Krug because we wanted to work with Sunset Rubdown. And Chris says, "Hey, Justin is in Montreal. You got to meet him." And so I met him in front of a venue. There's a bar in front of the Ukrainian Federation.
Oh yeah, there's I think it's like maybe Casa de Popolo. Maybe I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Anyway,
maybe.
regardless,
I can't remember the name of it.
Maybe I'm thinking of it as Sala Rosa. I might just be wrong.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but we chain smoked, drank a couple pitchers of beer. We talked about everything. We really hit it off, and that was the first time either Chris or I had met Justin. And it was in Montreal. And
what was he doing up there?
His girlfriend lived there at the time. And she was in a band, and I can't remember. Her name's Liz. She eventually was in Broken Social Scene, but she was in another band, and I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head right now.
Do you guys still listen to demos that people just send in, like randomly? Is that still kind of the way it happens?
No, it doesn't.
I figured. Yeah.
No. I wish. Maybe there'll be a return to that, after everything becomes so algorithmic. Then it becomes like, the thing that someone bothers to send in the mail is how you
Or like an email, but so more you're seeking out the artist these days if you want to sign a new artist.
Yes. Yeah. And it's not even me anymore. That's the thing.
Of course. Yeah.
But there's a team that does it. But yes, it's.
Yeah.
I would say there's also references from other artists like, hey,
for sure.
I just saw this band on tour. It's amazing. Or my best friend.
Presumably, it always worked that way.
That's
a little
nice.
bit.
Yeah, that's nice that happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I think this is more Chris Swanson's domain, but I just alarm bells went off in my head because you talked about Montreal, and I sort of I probably got the place that you were chain smoking wrong, but it made me remember that a band that's extremely dear to me, and I know to him, and I don't know what your connection is exactly, but probably something similar. One of the sort of the big bands is Magnolia Electric Company and Jason Molina.
Which was like probably, Jason Molina is the reason the Secretly Group had it
even exist
shot to get off the ground. And I have heard, and I need to see it ASAP, but Magnolia Electric Company's live show right now, it's long and it's awesome, and without Jason,
of course,
but it's worth checking out. It hasn't been announced yet, so I'm probably breaking some rule here, but there's going to be in Bloomington, I think in August, there'll be a 30th anniversary show, and 3 nights of shows, and one of the nights will be Magnolia Electric Company.
He was and I say this just as a fan, just a uniquely beautiful man.
Yeah. Very generous.
Yeah.
And great, just one of the greatest songwriters.
Agreed.
I'm just looking at your lineup right now for fun. It's nice. Tim Heidecker. That's cool. So you put out his record. It was good, his indie rock record, I thought, that he made. That was... Yeah.
It's fun. It was fun to work with Tim. He was also, like, our connection to Tim was he starred in a few movies that was made by Rick Alverson. And Rick Alverson was the primary songwriter, singer for Drunk, who, very early on had put out music by. And so, we put out, I think, like 4 albums, Drunk albums, and like maybe 5 or 6 Spokane records. I can't remember exactly what the number is. And these were all by Rick Alverson. And then, and we lost money on all of those, but he's like, hey, I have a new way for you guys to lose money. Invest in indie movies that I'm making.
Right.
And so, but he made some brilliant movies. One called The Comedy, one called Entertainment, but The Comedy starred Tim Heidecker.
Right.
Entertainment. Is that the kind of Neil Hamburger?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And Tim Heidecker's in that too.
Okay. I remember that one.
Yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that when you were talking earlier about, like, you had this sense that Jag at one point needed to kind of go more rock or more kind of on this like psychedelic trip, do you think that rosters need to be cohesive, or do you think eclecticism's like more honest, really?
I used to think that for a brief period of time, because I think the roots of Jag Jaguar started just championing local artists, and also beggars couldn't be choosers. Like, I was lucky that any artist would want to work with me at the time, but so it was very local focused, and so I was releasing, and then when I brought on partners, we were releasing music that just was available around us locally. But then later, I think after, we were getting a little bit of success and could pick a little bit of the music that we're releasing, I started to think that, what's really important for a label is to have some sort of cohesive sound or identity. Thinking about, labels like Cranky or Touch and Go, or even Drag City that seem to like nail something in particular.
Or Saddle Creek, maybe at that time. Or
Saddle Creek, yeah. But I think by accident, but also just because, we always just went where we felt connected, and we weren't necessarily fans of just one genre.
Yeah.
We became an eclectic label, and it's worked, So, like, people might ask, what is the Jag Jaguar sound? I have no idea how to describe it. I used to joke it was the wheezy sounds of white male depression. But it's not that. It's more than that.
Don't put that on your website. I'm not sure it'll work too well.
I have an interesting question that I like to add. It's rare that we get people like you to come on our show who know so much about the industry and what's going on, and I know very little. You have a 9-year-old, I have a 2-year-old, so I'm pretty checked out right now. But I'm curious about how you feel about rock and roll legends that won't stop being on top, that they keep going, that they keep making records, marketing themselves with big money, being in the Times Square Spotify like countdown thing to the new album coming out, still charging exorbitant amounts of money to play, taking up space in a world where there's a lot of young hungry rock and rollers trying to do stuff. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel, let me put it this way. I don't hold it against them.
Yeah.
I hold it maybe against the system that puts them in such a primary position. And there's, we have big companies who've invested a lot in their recordings.
Yeah.
You have big management companies and big booking agencies that have invested a lot in the careers of those artists.
Safer investment too.
Safer investment. The venues want to know that someone can fill their rooms and have a track record of doing it. There's a real, merchandising machine behind nostalgia. And, that's just what we are culturally. And I think streaming economics played into that. And
for sure.
Although we had it before streaming as well. We had The Who came back. What was, sort of the comeback of classic rock in the 80s was sort of a repackaging of the past.
Yeah. Did that happen? Yeah. But I guess for me, as like, I always viewed it though as, even I'm sure those people would agree that it was like a nostalgia thing in a way, that it was like, we're bringing this back, this old band from the 60s. But now there's an air to it that's like, we're still current artists. This is not a legacy thing. Yeah. Like, we're working with pop producers and people, and like, we're still on top of our game. That just feels a little bit
disingenuous.
Like there's a responsibility of them to do what they would have liked in the 60s when the old crooners and people were kind of stepping down and making way for the new generation. And I don't know, something stinks a little bit to me.
But the stink's the same of like, I mean, the Rolling Stones, right?
Yeah.
Like, they kept on putting out new record after new record in the 80s and 90s. And Pink Floyd, post Roger Waters. I think, maybe until recently, they weren't really sort of behaving
I guess
like,
so.
But I think it also just speaks to like the consolidation of and market concentration of everything, like in the atmosphere, or like in our sort of business, like universe, like corporations buying up all these smaller things, live music promoters, ticketing companies owning the venues, increased costs of touring. You can't buy a CD anymore, you stream, so there's no money there, and the media consolidation thing. So I think you can go on. Like, it's just a safer investment to put Paul McCartney out in an arena.
Exactly. And Paul McCartney is another great example of, and it's that the thing you're talking about, James, is like concentration in one area reinforces concentration in another.
Absolutely.
So like when venues, start to focus more on large established acts, it reduces opportunities for up and comers. Same with streaming services. Same with like indie press that used to champion music. Like, where are they now, right? And what reach do they have? And even if they did survive, like the Stereo Gum story that I mentioned, they relied so much on like Google search and to drive traffic to them.
Optimization.
And now that Google is like, hey, let's, instead of driving people to the Stereo Gums of the world, let's give them an AI summary of what we crawled on Stereo Gum. It's killing the independent press.
Well, I think it's also worth remembering in these kind of dark times that we're talking to you, someone who owns a successful independent record label. So, it can be done.
And I think it's still viable. I think I think it's good to be clear-eyed about the challenges, but I
Yeah.
like that you're thinking, hey, but it can be done, and to the extent there's something worth fighting here, if you get too defeatist,
Yeah.
then you've already lost the fight.
Well, it's not even worth fighting. It's just, what else are you going to do?
Yep.
You know?
Do you have to work harder now than you used to, you think, to start a label or to have
To start a label, yes. I think it's very hard to start a label right now.
Yeah.
And I think we're lucky, and some established independent labels are lucky because we have back catalog.
Yeah.
And so the thing that, I was criticizing earlier is actually, part of what supports us. But if you're a brand new label now, you release an album, you might not, because streaming gives you the revenue back in a much slower way, you might not recover your investment for 4 or 5 years, but you're a startup, you have no cash.
Yeah.
Whereas in sort of the old world, when I put out a CD 30 years ago, sometimes I got the money back to cover the cost of pressing that CD within months of it coming out.
That being said, recording music can cost a lot less too now. So
yes,
there are ways in which, it kind of can balance out to some extent.
Yeah.
You must put out lots of records at this point that have been made in bedrooms.
They used to be made in bedrooms before too, though, right? Like,
I guess so.
Yeah, but they sound better now, made in bedrooms.
I feel like Pink Mountaintops. Where did they record that?
I think the self-titled record was done on 8-track.
Yeah,
I think.
that feels like something that would have been done in a little room. Josh and Steve.
Do you still think that, like, this independent spirit and the fact that you, because I'm 41 years old, playing music my whole life, I find it very hard to conceptualize a way in which you can build a career without thinking of the ways in which bands did. I mean, I'm even reading like a Chris Bell biography right now, and it the way in which directly building fan bases by the traditional ways of touring and performing your songs and meeting people. I find it very hard to imagine a world where that still isn't the primary way in which you kind of have to do it. How do you feel about that?
Well, going back to optimism, I hope that the younger generation is starting to see that things aren't going to turn out well if we just listen to the algorithm.
Exactly.
Right. And that we need to have agency. We have to sort of choose what our future is going to be, culturally, politically, etc. And I'm optimistic there'll be some sort of reaction, some sort of countercultural movement where people return back to smaller scenes, things being smaller. I mean, when was the last time an independent label emerged that was sort of
was geolocated in a certain place? Yeah, I was thinking about this the whole time you've been talking. I'm like, where were you starting your label? Bloomington?
Well, Jag started in Charlottesville, Virginia, but then I moved 3 years after I started it to Bloomington.
I mean, and you found
and the first
all
3
that
years
music
were
there?
it was Virginia artists for the first 3 years. And then after I moved to Bloomington, because Secretly Canadian was hogging all the Indiana talent, I had to, with Chris, we had to find other artists outside of Bloomington.
So you went state to state, kind of.
Yeah.
That was your plan.
We wanted to do what Sufjan Stevens was doing.
Yeah, we never finished it, but he was...
No.
It was a good idea, I guess, at the time. Yeah. So yeah, I think that, I agree.
think you're right.
I think that the sort of independent spirit involves reaching people on a much more sort of micro level, and it's your choice, really, isn't it? If you want to exist in the algorithm, I mean,
and I think it's like the value system is we used to value access, and now we need to say access is not good by itself. We need to value connection.
Yeah, and curation, even within your own, I know physical media is on the rise again. I've heard that record sales are the highest they've been in years, and even DVDs and things. I think people are getting a little bit fed up with having to license movies and things from these massive companies, and then they're gone, and then you're like, oh, I have to get Paramount now, and I have to get Amazon again, and whereas you can buy these things and then you own them, and you have complete autonomy over what you're watching, what your kids are watching, everything. So
even in the fine print of the iTunes store, like you buy something that you thought you bought as a download of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh man, I have this, and even if you were to manage perfect management of your hard drives forever, iTunes can just grab that movie back from you or
really
make it disappear.
There's that brutal interview from a few years ago with Bruce Willis, who was obviously kind of starting to struggle a little bit mentally with his sort of degrading, physical and mental health. But like when he realized that this legacy of music that he'd bought online didn't actually exist to him, and he wanted to pass it down to his children, it was a horrible interview. Because he'd been hoodwinked by Apple, into believing that this was all, his whole collection of music was things that he was going to pass on. And it was like, you can't do that. You don't own it.
It's a license just with you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really sad.
What do you think?
At least he can teach them how to play that mean
Well, he
blues
can't.
harp.
He's so unwell, isn't he? It's so tragic, Hopefully he can. Music's very powerful,
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think of, that running your label has been like intuition, A&R versus like strategy?
It's mostly always been intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Very uncalculated. I think we chased things that got us really excited. I remember Black Mountain. Chris and I were on a road trip, and he had I think it was either a CDR, I think, and it was a CDR that was the recording of them, Black Mountain, playing on Canadian public radio.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such an amazing live performance. And we fell in love with it. And the whole road trip, we're just playing this, Black Mountain and Pink Mountaintop songs over and over again. And
amazing.
Based on that, we have to work with this artist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But he'd put the long hours, the long yards in too, him and Josh, with Joke with the Palm and stuff. I mean...
Yes.
They'd been doing that for a long time, which probably is, I suppose, when you're signing a band too, like, that's something that's a positive. You're like, well, they're capable of this impossible way of life, of getting out on the road in a van and doing it,
Yeah. And when we heard that recording of them performing live for Canadian Public Radio, they sounded almost exactly like they would on the Black Mountain CD, the first self-titled one, and we're like, oh wow, this is a band that can really
play.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think when you ask Johnny, like, is rock and roll coming back? I think it will, because I think people are going to appreciate bands that actually can play their music.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, we're seeing like bands like Geese and things being sort of pushed to the forefront of music a little bit again.
And all the Speedy Wonderground stuff over the last 5-10 years, the Dan Carey productions. There's a lot of rock and roll there. Yeah.
But Geese is the first one that I've noticed, but I'm old too. But that I've seen really, like, it's big, everybody's talking about it kind of thing, a young band. Yeah, maybe.
Well, a more pop level, although they're not pop at all, but Turnstile did really well at the Grammys.
Yeah, they did, and they've been kicking about for a little bit too.
Yeah.
I think that there's probably like our relationships. This isn't a profound statement, but it's like our relationship with technology are two-way. They're not exclusive. So if you start making music, if AI is going to start generating music, there's going to be a confluence with not wanting to sound that way too. People not wanting that, and that might mean you get more. There's more value than ever in mistakes and rawness, and obviously because we fetishize artists, the process in which things were made. We might just get like 10,000 Nebraskas or something, because people might want that, as opposed to, a shiny song.
Well, if AI causes us to get 10,000 Nebraskas,
we're doing
then
well.
Maybe AI is all right.
Yeah, absolutely. But it should create, it's always worth reminding ourselves, and our listeners are musicians mostly, and also like kind of just fans of music, that like that shit's, we're independent. Like, that stuff's big business, big money, cabal stuff, like, that you have to interface with to survive, but we're not those people, and we don't have their tastes.
Well, some people have pointed to like poptimism that happened in recent decades, where take Pitchfork, that used to sort of really focus on underground bands.
Of course.
At some point, it became cool to also like pop acts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there was also just a lot of like crossover between the pop world and the underground. And I wonder if there'll be also a reaction against that as well.
Sure. There was cultural reasons for that too, I think, at Pitchfork, the way in which we were interfacing with pop culture and changed dramatically since they were making and breaking careers in the early 2000s, I think.
Sure, but also, like, as Pitchfork grew as a platform, it had to rely more and more on traffic. Mm-hmm. And so it was incentivized to start to connect the pop world to this underground world that had a ceiling.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of like what's going on right now is you have these massive platforms that have to scale up to be successful.
Yeah.
And so they are looking for the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, scaling up means kind of shaving off the sides a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that you're in a position where like that, I mean, you're a big enterprise at this point, that this is a difficult place for you to kind of, you have to sort of discover, like, good taste can't be the only way in which you do business. Intuition surely can't be the only way in which you do business now.
This is I'll put it this way. I think we'll always only release music that we have strong aesthetic connection to, that reflects our tastes, and I think we'll never water down our tastes. I think we're okay being the size we are, not growing any further. It's I think the balance is like we need to be big enough to be able to compete with these larger businesses, because we want to have a hand in culture, and we want to bring fringe things and freaky things to the center, but at the same time we don't want to lose who we are, and so the analogy I always think about is we never want to become a factory, but we can be a co-op garden, and let people grow their plants and their crops in whatever freaky way they want. But maybe if we can get enough of our scale together, we can get better soil, better water, better sunshine. But
yeah, I think
be assembly line oriented.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. And I think that the thing about indie rock that's kind of cool is, on the one hand, you could think at some point they took all guitar-based music and kind of lumped it into this one genre called indie rock. And that's sort of, whatever. But on the other hand, because it became this thing that's like a little bit smaller than everything else, it allowed for maybe a bit more freedom to be weird and to make the kind of records people want to do. And to hear you, someone who's like one of the the coolest and best labels to do it, support that is a neat thing. Stay in your lane, let people do what they want, and like we're okay to be sort of over here on the outskirts a little bit. It's neat.
Yeah, and you don't need to dominate anyone.
Yeah,
right? You don't
exactly.
have to be top of the charts.
You actually probably shouldn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you said you don't want to be the factory. I was thinking you could end that sentence with like, but we do want to be Factory Records.
Oh, there at least some of Factory Records, and I can point out exactly which albums.
The cool bit, or like the Peter Saville New Order side of it. Maybe.
What did you grow up listening to? I just like talking music with people a little bit too on the show. Like what are some of your favorite records?
Oh, great question. I grew up listening to a lot of Pink Floyd. I remember early on.
What's your favorite Floyd record?
It's probably the triptych in the 70s: Animals, Wish You Were Here, and Dark Side of the Moon.
That's why you like Black Mountain.
Yeah. So those three records in particular.
I do like
The Wall and Final Cut and even earlier stuff like Metal.
No Sid?
I like Sid, but you know what? I'm more a Gilmore Waters
Yeah.
Pink Floyd fan. And
That's cool.
yeah, and but so a lot of Pink Floyd. Then I, discovered Joy Division, and I got into just anything that was depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My senior year of high school, I remember reading the City Washington paper one day and learning about Sonic Youth and This Mortal Coil.
Sure, yeah.
which-
So,
Nice.
4AD, you're talking about big independent labels here too. You can sort of see a genus. SST and 4AD, I think there would be the labels.
yeah.
You know?
And also growing up in DC, when I was in high school, I was, a friend of mine, Paulo Ponze. We were starting a band together, but we never played live. But he dragged me to these shows, and I saw, early Discord bands. I saw Fugazi playing in basement, church basements, and
Yeah.
Incredible.
Rites of Spring at Fort Reno, and so there's the whole DC sort of, and also DC was really good, with sort of being a fertile incubator of record labels like Simple Machines
For
and
sure.
Teen Beat, and so that was also
Yeah.
influential.
Good town.
You can see
Sure.
how this would all this is your origin story here, really. Because these are some truly independently spirited bands you're talking about.
And also Dave Matthews Band.
maybe not Pink Floyd, but I'm thinking like Sonic Youth as a prototype. I mean,
Dave
didn't you end up
Matthews Band.
signing Dinosaur Jr. as well?
Yes, that was like
A dream?
That was a dream.
Yeah.
What were you about to say about Dave Matthews Band?
Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
Well, I also I went to college in Charlottesville, Virginia, so I also watched Dave Matthews Band.
Nice.
Play to 3 people and then become something massive.
Yeah.
Did
It
you
wasn't
see it
necessarily
coming?
my cup of tea musically, but
So are you a musician yourself to this day a little bit, or that was back in the day?
that was back in the day. I can play a few power chords.
Did you
I think
come to a point that you were like, maybe you wanted to play music, and then you were like, you know what, I'd be better on the other side of this thing?
Well, when I started the record label, I didn't even think I was going to start the record label. I was dropping out of college, working a bunch of jobs at the same time. Do you remember that movie Rushmore?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the main character, really smart kid, but he was flunking out of school kind of. But he was in every club
Yeah.
possible. And I feel like, I was kind of like that version of kid, but in college, like I was doing every extracurricular. Eventually my parents, cut me off and then I was working a lot of jobs and, I was working at the record store. I was, I taught myself to be a graphic designer. And so, eventually I got a job being the art director at a alternative weekly. But then these were all jobs that were paying like, $8, $9 an hour at the time. I can't even remember. It might even have been less, whatever the minimum wage was. And one job I had that I loved was doing overnights at a home for mentally handicapped adults because I was paid to sleep. I thought this was the best, but then a snowstorm happened and then I got a windfall, and that's what I used to start the label. And I think it was never something I ever planned to do. It just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I have maybe a final question for you, unless you have another question, James.
I was just going to say I'm really glad it did happen because
so am I.
I'm really glad and thankful for the music that you've been able to give us or help put out over the last 30 years, because I've enjoyed a hell of a lot of it and continue to this day. So thanks, man.
Keep up the good work, man.
Thanks, guys.
and if you
I'm
ever-
curious. You have one more question, John.
I was just going to say very briefly, if you ever do decide to become a music, you can make a record again, you should speak to the guy who owns Jag about putting it out.
Thank you.
No, you go first. What's your question?
I'm just what are the records that we've released on Jaguar that you guys are switched on to?
I mean,
man.
In the early days, definitely the Black Mountain record as a fan was pivotal to me because it it's central to me when I moved to Vancouver, you know, like, so I was like, whoa, this band's here. And then with Lady Hawk, they became really good friends of mine just when they were signing to your label. And I just was such a big fan of them. I couldn't believe that they would hang out with me. I was like a new person in the city, and I thought of them as rock stars, and we were very, very tight. And it was a very exciting time of my life. And it was like, I remember them talking about there's this new label. There's a label, Jag. They're going to sign us, you know. And I remember being there for that whole process just as a fan. I like the Bon Iver record a lot. And I remember, obviously, we're huge Cutworms fans. I mean, I think his music's like super important.
His new record is definitely maybe the best record I've heard this year. So,
and that vein that he's
Max
in,
is
of kind of like, you know, Westerberg, Chilton, Americana, existentialist, kind of Elliott Smith. I'll take as much as that as you can get. I love it. Yeah. You know,
he's got a hell of a manager too, Kim. She's a good friend of ours, and
she's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, what James said exactly. I mean, for me working at the record store back then, I mean, yeah, now Max, and there's so much now too. You're still doing it, but back then, just looking at your lineup now online and the records you put out, and remembering being a kid at the record store and how many of them I just saw that were on our wall, and that people would be coming in and we'd just be playing them all day long. I mean, like so many of them, man. And they were just a part of my youth, the covers, you know, and then we got tickets to every show in the city for free. So like every time they'd all come through, I mean, I saw all these bands, you know, and it was just a part of my youth.
I guess a big UMO fan too. I remember seeing
Ruben is so brilliant.
Seeing them play at a place called the Biltmore, opening for a band. I feel like they opened for Girls. Remember that band, Girls? Maybe.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing them and being like, I have no idea what's going on. This is like before the first record, and then I've seen them so many times since. I'm looking at your catalog here of bands because there's so many.
I have my final question, which is: have you ever considered signing podcasts to your label? And if so, would you sign our podcast? We can do it all, man. We'll go on tour. We'll do whatever. We'll do everything a band does. You know?
So Eric, you guys know Eric Dinas? Who,
just from the email thread I've been on recently.
Yeah. So I think he signed a podcast to Jag for us a while ago.
There you go.
Without, I never saw the contract. I don't know what the contract says, but I think it was a publicity stunt.
Well, we'll send you a demo.
Yeah, send us.
They don't
send
listen
a demo.
to demos. They don't listen
send
to
a demo.
I'm looking. Okay, Preoccupations. That was a crazy record.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, women, Preoccupations, called Viet Cong for a moment.
Women,
women
Vancouver
were
too. Patrick, right?
To some extent, kind of via Edmonton. Like
he was around though.
Band, insane band to see.
Are you guys familiar with Pat Flagle's the Cindy? Cindy
of course.
Lee?
It's what they've done.
I remember him in the city in Vancouver too.
Yeah, and that record he put out, recently is so good. And also, it's interesting his approach to, his career now is he doesn't want to play the game at all, right? His music's not available on streaming services. He's going for something that's a different path. It's inspiring.
It's inspiring, and it speaks to like sort of these partly what we've talked about here. It's like it's scarcity versus abundance, I guess, with him.
Yes.
Where it's like, and his music is so good, and also like it's authentic to the way they express themselves. It doesn't feel trite or misguided. It's like, no, this is thoroughgoing with their identity as I understand it. So it's cool as fuck, Yeah,
and they would prefer to connect in a genuine way with 500 people than sell 50,000 records.
Yeah, and it probably worked out financially, I would hope.
I think probably a lot of people would probably prefer that maybe, but they don't really have the guts to do it.
It's
what
that
he's
too.
doing. So it is definitely inspiring.
Okay, I've got Parts and Labor up here. I can kind of trying to remember Parts and Labor. I'm on your website. I'm having a really good time. Amazing.
Well, you probably have a lot of big business and important things to take care of today, so we won't keep you any longer. Or maybe you're just going to go kick back and listen to some of the records you've put out, which is how you should be celebrating your 30 years.
Well, thank you. I'm going to maybe I'm kind of inspired to make a playlist of the Canadian artists we work
You've
with.
got to do it.
Oh, man, you got to do it. Put it out. The people need it.
Yeah.
Well,
Maybe
anyway,
we can co-sponsor that. That could be our first business deal.
Collab, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Darius Van Arman, and you need no introduction, and nor does the music you've released. Thanks for coming on Impossible Way of Life. Maybe we'll do it again one day.
I would love that.
Appreciate your
Thank you for
time,
having me.
man. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.